Detective James Jimmy Walker stood in front of the precinct, rain pouring down in sheets around him. Today was different. Today he wasn't just catching criminals, he was leaving it all behind. He could feel the weight of his badge in his pocket, heavy with memories of sirens, gunshots, and late-night stakeouts. But as he reached for his badge, he felt a surge of freedom, a chance to finally break free from the darkness that had haunted him for years. Jimmy took a deep breath, wiping rain off his brow and blinking away fatigue. He thought about the nights spent chasing down leads, the constant worry creeping into his mind about his safety and the safety of his family. It had been 16 years of service, and at that moment, standing in the pouring rain, he knew it was time to say goodbye. As he walked back inside, he could feel the eyes on him. Officers exchanged glances, some sympathetic, others questioning. The precinct was filled with the usual sounds, phones ringing, laughter from the break room, and the buzz of urgency that always lingered in the air. But today it felt heavier, like the calm before a storm. Called Sergeant Morales, his brow furrowed. Jimmy paused, glancing back at the men and women he had shared so much with. "I'm done, Morales." Gasps filled the room. Some officers shook their heads in disbelief. Others stared, unsure how to react. Morales took a step forward, concern washing over his features. "You can't be serious." A sense of relief washed over Jimmy as he replied, "I can't do it anymore." Morales sighed, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "Look, we can talk about this." Jimmy's heart raced. The last case had been a turning point. A child had been lost in the chaos of a gang shooting, and it ate at him more than he wanted to admit. He had promised himself that night, staring at the walls of the hospital with the distraught mother, that he wouldn't let the darkness win. But here he was, soaked to the bone, knowing he had to choose a different path. "I've made up my mind, Morales," he said firmly. With that, he walked toward his desk and placed the badge on it, looking around the room one last time. The echoes of laughter, the memories of camaraderie, and the friendships forged through fire and fear all began to blur. It felt like stepping out of a world where he'd felt so alive and yet so trapped. As he walked out, the door swung shut behind him, marking an end to an era of his life. He felt lighter but also terrified. What comes next? Days passed, and with each one, he lingered in an unfamiliar silence that came after the sirens. He filled his time with long walks and books, hoping to rediscover who he was outside of the badge, but peace eluded him, pulling him deeper into a sense of loss. On a gray Tuesday morning, Jimmy got a call from an old friend named Mark. "Hey, I heard you're out." Mark was a Sharpie-suited corporate guy now, having left law enforcement for a life in business. "Sure," Jimmy replied, hoping for a distraction. They met at a coffee shop that buzzed with life. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the chatter of customers. Mark sat across from him, an easy smile on his face. "It's different," Jimmy admitted, looking down at his untouched cup of coffee. Mark leaned in, a little concerned. "You know, we have openings in the firm." Jimmy chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Why not? You have all those skills from being a detective. You could bring a fresh perspective. Plus, the corner office is nice," Mark teased, glancing to the side. Jimmy laughed again, but the thought lingered. A corner office. He hadn't thought about what the future could be like. Just the idea of stepping into an office without the threat of danger seemed comforting, yet unsettling. He thought about the security of a steady paycheck, health benefits, and regular hours, all things he'd sacrificed for too long. After that coffee, an idea began to take root. He called Mark again a few days later. "I'll consider it," he said, still unsure but feeling something stir inside him. Week by week, the thought nagged at him. Maybe he could do something new. He watched the city change outside his window, and with each passing day, he felt the thrill of possibility. He decided to visit the firm Mark worked at. Arriving in the sleek office building, he immediately noticed the polished floors and the sharp-dressed professionals bustling around. It was like stepping into another world. The high ceilings, the shiny furniture, everything felt far removed from the dank precinct he missed more than he expected. Mark greeted him with a big smile, leading him through the maze of desks and conference rooms. "You might actually like this place," he said. As they walked, Jimmy found himself relaxing. He listened to Mark explain things about corporate structure, strategy, and team dynamics, and for the first time he felt a flicker of interest. There was something intriguing about problem-solving that didn't involve a high-speed chase or the threat of violence. Mark suggested. Jimmy hesitated but agreed. Sitting in on the meeting was a revelation. The way they brainstormed ideas and problem-solved together, it looked strangely familiar to him. They discussed strategies like detectives discussing case clues, except now the stakes seemed to involve profits rather than lives. Jimmy found himself contributing, offering insights that flowed naturally. The rhythm of the dialogue danced in a way he could understand. At the end of the meeting, a team leader turned to him with a friendly smile. "You have some great ideas, Jimmy." For the first time, he felt a spark of hope. A job offer seemed within reach. In the weeks that followed, Jimmy slowly transitioned. He started attending workshops and learning about business strategies. Many late nights were spent poring over reports and analyzing trends, but he didn't mind. It felt good. It felt right. In the office, there were no sirens, no threats of danger, just the quiet clacking of keyboards and a sense of purpose he had thought long lost. As he settled into his new life, Jimmy found the balance he had yearned for. He enjoyed coming home in the evenings to a warm dinner and the sound of life in his small apartment. The trauma of his former career began to recede. He felt the past drift away, not entirely, but enough to allow him to breathe. Months passed, and he was officially offered the corner office everyone joked about. It was a significant promotion, a testament to how far he had come. The view was breathtaking, stretching across the city skyline, reminding him of the world he once protected from the dangers below. Standing there, he felt a surge of emotions. The past had shaped him, but it didn't define him anymore. He could see the new path laid out before him. On a clear afternoon, looking out at the sun-drenched city, he realized something profound about his decision. Leaving behind law enforcement didn't mean he'd lost his purpose. Instead, he had transformed it. He wasn't hunting criminals anymore, but he was still solving problems and helping people in a different way. The skills he honed as a detective were still alive in him, just adapting to a new life, a new mission. As he settled into his chair, ready to make the next big decision, a rush of gratitude washed over him. The change had been scary, yes, but in surrendering to the unknown, he had found something more fulfilling. This wasn't just a new job, it was a second chance. He smiled, thinking back to that rainy day in front of the precinct. Everything had changed, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Life was unpredictable, but he was ready for whatever came next, ready to meet it with a steady heart and a clear mind. As he looked out at the horizon, the future was bright and filled with promise. Detective Tony Reed stood in the flickering light of the precinct, heart racing as he felt the cool metal of his badge in his palm. It was heavy with memories, the night shifts chasing down suspects, the adrenaline of the unknown, and the heartbreak of too many families torn apart. This moment was surreal. He'd never thought he'd find himself here, ready to hand in his badge and walk away from the only life he'd known. As the dim fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, Tony took a deep breath. His mind replayed images of his last case, the one that had pushed him to his breaking point. A 12-year-old boy caught in the crossfire of a gang shootout, dead in the street. The mothers wailing, the sirens blaring. It was a sound that echoed in his mind day and night. That hot summer evening, he made a promise to himself that he would not let this job consume him like it had so many before. He couldn't let the darkness win. He stepped forward, eyes locked on Sergeant Johnson, who was hunkered over paperwork at his desk. Tony had always respected Johnson, a tough-as-nails officer who had walked the thin blue line for more than 20 years. Today, however, he was scared of what Johnson might say. "Hey, Tony," Johnson said, glancing up. "Sergeant," Tony replied, voice steady even as his heart raced. "I'm done." The air grew thick with silence, Johnson's brow furrowed in disbelief. "You can't be serious, you're one of our best." "I know," Tony whispered, "but I can't do it anymore." Johnson leaned back in his chair, a mixture of disappointment and concern etched across his face. "You're making a mistake, Reed. The job gets to all of us, but you're good at this." But Tony already felt the weight lifting off his shoulders with those words. He had made a decision that had been brewing deep inside him for too long. It felt right. He had to take that leap. He handed his badge over to Johnson, a simple act that felt monumental. Snapping it into the sergeant's hands, he felt like he was shedding a skin, leaving behind not just a job, but also the burdens of an entire career. As he turned to leave, he noticed the faces of his colleagues, a mix of shock and sympathy, but he didn't look back. The cool air outside hit him like a refreshing wave, washing away the tension of the precinct. He walked down the street, feeling lighter, even exhilarated, but as the adrenaline faded, the weight of uncertainty crept back in. What now? What lay ahead for him in this vast unknown? Days turned into weeks, and Tony found himself adrift. Shadows from the past lingered, haunting him as he tried to establish a new routine. The silence of his empty apartment felt deafening. No sirens, no action, just echoes of memories he wished he could forget. One gray morning, while sipping bitter coffee, his old partner, Max, called him. "Hey, Tony, let's grab a drink." That evening, he met Max at a dive bar on the outskirts of town, a place filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. As he settled into a booth, he was struck by how different the world felt outside of the precinct. The bar buzzed with life, people enjoying themselves, free from the weight of duty or danger. "Man, it's good to see you," Max said, raising his pint. "Cheers," Tony replied, clinking his glass against Max's, though it felt hollow. "Look, Tony," Max said, leaning in, "I get it, you needed to step back, but have you thought about what's next?" Tony sighed, swirling the foam at the top of his beer. "I just don't know if I can jump back into anything yet. The mind games from the job." Max nodded, his eyes sincere. "You have skills, man. You're sharp. You could be doing a million things. Corporate security," the thought was jarring. He imagined himself in a suit and tie, crunching numbers instead of chasing criminals. It seemed unimaginable, but also comforting. There was a part of him that craved stability and a normal life. In the following weeks, Tony began to explore this new path. He sent out applications, attended networking events, and even dusted off the resume he hadn't touched in years. Slowly but surely, he began to immerse himself in the world outside of law enforcement. Then one day, Tony received a call from a large corporation that had reviewed his application. "Mr. Reed, we'd like to interview you for a position in our security team." His heart raced as he agreed to meet. Sitting in the sleek conference room of the corporate office, he was awestruck. The polished tables, the sparkling glass walls, everything felt foreign yet exciting. He was nervous but driven by a newfound sense of purpose. During the interview, he spoke passionately about his time on the force, recounting stories of leadership, teamwork, and problem-solving. The panel listened intently, a mix of intrigue and admiration in their eyes. "Your experience is invaluable, Tony," the lead interviewer said, leaning back in his chair. "This role is about more than just keeping the employees safe. It's about strategy and vigilance." That's when it hit him. He still wanted to protect people, just in a different way. In moments of uncertainty, he reminded himself that skills matter regardless of the setting. Law enforcement had shaped him, building the bones of who he was, but he could adapt. The weight of his past felt lighter than ever. The door to a new life was opening. Over the next few months, he adjusted to office life. As each day turned into a week, Tony began to thrive. He learned to navigate corporate culture with a mix of humor and humility. The team appreciated his straightforward nature, often laughing at how he could break tension during late-night meetings with a well-timed joke about bureaucracy. As months rolled by, his hard work paid off. Tony was promoted to a managerial position within the security department. The corner office with its sweeping view of the skyline became his new reality. He was proud of that achievement, of how far he had come. He often grinned while looking out the window, feeling more alive than he ever thought possible. Then there was a busy Tuesday, that shook him. A company-wide emergency drill was scheduled, simulating a crisis that would require immediate action from his team. As the alarms blared and the floor erupted in chaos, Tony seamlessly guided everyone to safety, drawing upon instincts honed during his years on the force. The adrenaline rushed back, but this time it felt different. He was in control. They gathered outside, the crowd buzzing with anxious chatter, and he took charge, briefing everyone on what had happened and what they needed to do next. In that moment, he felt the energy of his old life blending seamlessly into this new one. It was exhilarating, like running again, but without the danger that had haunted him. They were safe, and he had played a key role in that safety. After the drill concluded, he stood with his team, reflecting on the success they'd just achieved. It felt good to lead, it felt good to help people. The weight of his past had finally transformed into a source of strength. Then one of the team members, a young woman named Lisa, approached him, a look of awe in her eyes. "You know, I used to think this was all so boring, but you really bring the excitement into the office." Tony chuckled, feeling a warm glow of pride. Months rolled into years, and in that corner office with the breathtaking view, Tony found his voice again. A voice that had been silenced by trauma and fear, but now it rang out loud and clear, forged from experience and resilience. And as he gazed at the skyline, he realized something profound. Handing in his badge hadn't closed the door on his past, it had opened a new chapter. He was still a protector, still a leader, just in a different way. Leaving the badge behind had felt like the end, but in reality it was just the beginning. With every challenge faced and every success earned, he grew bolder. The road wasn't always smooth, and there were moments he faltered, but he no longer feared the unknown. There was beauty in the uncertainty, that wild rush of possibilities stretching out in front of him. He knew he had a chance to help people again, to protect a different kind of community and make an impact in ways he was just beginning to understand. And that felt like true freedom. Detective Mark Sullivan stood on the balcony of his tiny apartment, staring out at the sprawling city below, a storm brewing in his heart. The hum of the traffic filled the air, but all he could hear were the voices from his last case screams of a desperate mother, the sirens blaring, the haunting image of a young girl lying on the pavement. It was a moment he couldn't shake, a memory that clung to him like a shadow. Tonight, something felt different. The weight of his badge, usually a source of pride, now felt like an anchor dragging him down. He took a deep breath and turned away from the view, stepping back inside. The walls felt closer, the silence louder. It was time to confront the truth he had been avoiding for too long. With a wave of determination, he grabbed his badge from the kitchen table. As it glinted under the fluorescent light, his heart raced. He thought about everything it represented: years of chasing criminals, the adrenaline rush, the sense of justice. But tonight felt like chains. He stumbled into his living room and dug through his jacket pocket for his car keys. Every step to his car was heavy. He barely noticed the rain starting to fall as he drove through the city streets. Memories flashed before him, the chaos of the precinct, the laughter of his fellow officers, and the late-night strategy meetings. But they all faded away, replaced by the faces of the victims he couldn't save. Mark arrived at the precinct. The building loomed over him, bustling with officers who went about their routines, oblivious to the storm raging inside of him. He pushed through the heavy doors and walked straight to the desk sergeant. "I need to talk to Captain Hayes," he said, his voice firm with resolve. Sergeant Lopez raised an eyebrow, confusion washing over her face. "I'm done," he replied, and the words hung in the air like a heavy fog. The tension wrapped around him like a tightening noose. It felt surreal yet liberating, but there was uncertainty too. How would they react? Would they understand? Lopez asked, looking genuinely concerned. "You're one of our best. I can't keep doing this," Mark said, meeting her gaze squarely. He walked down the familiar halls, the scent of coffee and paperwork mixing in the air. He spotted Captain Hayes in his office, poring over reports. Mark felt a rush of nostalgia mixed with dread. He had admired Hayes, the way he led with strength and integrity. "Captain," he announced, stepping inside without knocking. Hayes looked up, a slight smile on his face. But Mark could see the confusion start to cloud those warm eyes. Mark placed the badge on Hayes' desk, every ounce of his being focused on that single act. "I'm done." A heavy silence followed. The captain leaned back in his chair, shock etched across his features. "This isn't like you." Mark swallowed hard. "I can't keep chasing ghosts after that last case." "Listen," Hayes replied, leaning forward. "I understand this job takes its toll, but you're one of the best detectives we have. There's still time to take a break." A part of Mark wanted to stay to convince himself he could keep going, but another part felt a fierce sense of clarity. "No," he said, his voice unwavering. Hayes sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Mark, if there's anything I can do," but Mark held up his hand. "I appreciate it, really." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving behind a career that had once filled him with pride. Each step felt freeing, yet terrifying. The moment he stepped through the doors, a rush of uncertainty surged through him. What would come next? For days, he wandered through the city. Reassurance came in fleeting moments, catching glimpses of people living vibrant lives, completely unaware of the weight he carried. But clarity felt so far away, it was like longing for a ghost. Mark's thoughts drifted to his college friend Lisa, an ambitious executive in the corporate world. They'd often joked about him trading in his badge for a desk job. They met for coffee at a trendy cafe downtown, the rich aroma of beans filling the air around them. Lisa was wearing her familiar confident smile as she slid into the booth across from him. "So what's going on?" Mark hesitated, memories of sirens and chilling crime scenes tumbling around in his mind. "I quit the force," he said bluntly. Her eyes widened in shock. "You did what?" I'd had enough," he replied, glancing outside as raindrops began to patter against the window. She pressed, leaning in closer. "Honestly, I'm not sure what's next. I've been thinking about looking into corporate security or risk management." Lisa smiled, her expression shifting to one of excitement. "You should. You could thrive in that world." Mark felt an unexpected warmth spread through him, a spark of possibility igniting in his heart. As their conversation flowed, he couldn't shake the thought, could he really do this? Days turned into weeks as Mark explored corporate roles. He sent out resumes, networked, and attended seminars. However, each rejection felt like a tiny jab to his heart. Would he ever fit in a world so different from the one he knew? Finally, he received a phone call from a tech company that specialized in cybersecurity. "Mr. Sullivan, we were impressed with your background." His heart leaped as he agreed, feeling both exhilaration and dread. On the day of the interview, Mark stood in front of a sleek glass building that towered over him. The modern architecture felt intimidating, but a part of him thrived in the challenge. As he adjusted his tie, memories rushed back of the badge pinned to his chest, the life of a detective. A flush of determination filled him. It was time to embrace this new adventure. Inside, he waited in a waiting area, the hum of quiet conversations surrounding him. As he sat, he watched professionals walk by, each face a reminder of how far removed he felt from his old self. But he pushed forward, reminding himself of the strengths he'd developed over years in the field. When he finally walked into the boardroom, he took a deep breath, a familiar adrenaline rush flooding his veins. The panel was seated in front of him, eyes watching intently. "Mr. Sullivan, your background in law enforcement is intriguing," said the interviewer, looking over his resume. This was it. He closed his eyes briefly, envisioning those chaotic days on the force. Moments of danger turned into lessons of vigilance and resilience. Gathering his thoughts, he responded, "My experience taught me to think critically under pressure, to find solutions in crisis situations, and to prioritize the safety of others." As he spoke, he felt the tension ease from his shoulders. The panel nodded, engaging with him, and he found himself in his element. Eventually, after an engaging dialogue, they wrapped up, and as he walked out, he felt a rush of triumph. Maybe he belonged here after all. Weeks later, the phone rang. It was the company. "We'd like to offer you the position, Mr." Joy welled up in him, but there was still that familiar shadow. Could he truly leave behind the badge? He chuckled to himself. Maybe it wasn't about forgetting, it was about evolving. As he settled into his new role, he faced challenges that felt both familiar and foreign. The meetings were filled with numbers and strategies instead of crime scenes and suspects. But he thrived, navigating complex situations with a newfound sense of purpose. He found a team that valued collaboration and innovation just as much as the camaraderie he'd experienced in the precinct. Months turned into years, and Mark felt himself transforming. No longer did he wear the badge, but he wore ambition instead. The corner office came with promotions, each one a testament to the resilience he had cultivated. One rainy day, he stood by the window of his office, looking out over the city skyline. It had been a tough journey, one marked by hardship and growth. He reflected on those haunting moments of fear, regret, and grief, but they had shaped him, preparing him for this new life. In that moment, a sense of peace washed over him. He remembered the little girl from the case, a memory that had troubled him for so long. He couldn't change the past, but he could change how he approached the future. The phone rang, pulling him back into reality. It was Lisa. "Hey, just wanted to check in," he exclaimed, a smile spreading across his face. "I'm great, the new position has been incredible." She laughed. "I knew you could do it, you've got this." Mark looked out the window, feeling the weight of a smile. "It feels good, different but good, and you know what?" As he hung up, he felt empowered. Mark had handed in his badge, yes, but he had also handed in the fear that had kept him tethered to the past. Instead, he had embraced new horizons. Storm outside faded into a soft drizzle, and as he gazed out, he realized life was about moving forward. The corner office was proof he could find his footing again, and each day was a new chance to redefine who he was. No longer a detective, but still a protector. This was Mark's new beginning, and it was just the start of a much larger story. Detective Jake Ramirez stood in the dimly lit precinct, heart pounding in his chest, every beat echoing the weight of the decision he was about to make. It was just another chaotic day, but as the scents of stale coffee and sweat mixed in the air, something inside him snapped. The grind had become unbearable, the darkness he navigated each day felt suffocating. Just a week ago, he'd been in the shadow of a street corner, chasing a suspect who would have rather shot him than be caught. He clenched his jaw, staring into his partner's eyes, hoping for some sign of solidarity. But all he saw was the reflection of their last case, a girl, barely 17, who had lost everything to a senseless drive-by shooting. That day had changed everything for Jake. He couldn't shake off the sight of her mother's tears, wouldn't forget how helpless he felt. And now here he was, full of dread but filled with a strange sense of clarity. With a deep breath, he walked straight to Captain Harris's office. The captain was a formidable man, respected and feared. Jake rapped lightly on the door, steeling himself for the conversation he knew would be pivotal. Harris looked up with a puzzled frown. He asked, barely hiding his irritation as he flipped through a stack of case files, "I need to talk, Captain." "It's important," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Okay, come in, make it quick though." As Jake stepped inside, he closed the door behind him, sealing off the noise and chaos of the precinct. He felt a knot tightening in his stomach. "Captain, I'm handing in my badge," he said, and the weight of the words hung heavily in the air. Harris's expression shifted from annoyance to shock. "What? You can't be serious. You've been a damn good officer, Jake." "I can't do this anymore," Jake replied, his voice starting to tremble. "It's just too much." Harris leaned back in his chair, his steely gaze assessing. "Look, we all have days like this. It's the job, Jake, but you're a good cop." Jake took a shaky breath. "It's not just one case. It's the weight of every case, every face I can't save." Silence surrounded them like a heavy fog. Harris nodded slowly, a hint of understanding creeping into his eyes. "I won't stop you." The truth was, Jake had thought about it long and hard. He could feel the suffocating walls of the precinct closing in on him. With a determined nod, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his badge, its cold weight suddenly an unbearable reminder of a life that felt more like a prison than a calling. He handed it over, a simple act that felt monumental. As he walked out of the office, he glanced around at the familiar faces. They were so busy with their own burdens that they didn't notice the decision he'd just made. The precinct, once a second home filled with camaraderie, now felt more like a cage. Each step toward the exit echoed with the weight of his decision, both freeing and terrifying. Outside, the city buzzed with activity, a pulse of life that seemed so distant from the turmoil inside him. He walked aimlessly, the rain starting to drizzle, matching the storm brewing in his heart. What was next? What would the world look like without his badge? Days turned into weeks as Jake navigated his new existence. He buried himself in books about psychology and business, searching for answers. He roamed through coffee shops, staring out at the bustling streets, feeling trapped in a world that no longer had a place for him, a former cop without a purpose. One gray afternoon, while he sat at his favorite cafe, scrolling through job listings on his phone, his old friend Tom called. They had served together, bonded by the brutality of their work. "Hey Jake, let's grab a drink. It's been too long," Tom said cheerfully. His instincts said no, he wasn't ready to jump back into that world, but a swell of nostalgia pushed him to agree. They met at a lively bar, the air thick with laughter and clinking glasses. As Tom arrived, the camaraderie and warmth felt strangely inviting. Tom exclaimed, clapping Jake on the back, "I heard about your badge." "I'm getting there," Jake replied, forcing a smile. "It's just," Tom raised an eyebrow. "Both," Jake admitted. "It's like being in limbo," Tom asked, concern etched on his forehead. "I've been looking into corporate security," Jake said, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. Tom's face brightened. "That's a solid idea. You'd be great at it. With your instincts, you could prevent crimes instead of chasing them." "Yeah," Jake said, contemplating it. The conversation sparked a flicker of hope in him. Maybe there was a way to convert the skills he'd built into something that could still offer purpose. After that night, he poured himself into researching the corporate world, updating his resume and networking. Weeks later, he landed an interview with a tech firm known for its innovative approach to security solutions. The morning of the interview was drenched in anxiety. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, feeling like a stranger in his own skin. Arriving at the modern office, nerves flooded him as he entered the sleek lobby. The walls were glass, reflecting a world full of possibilities, but it felt surreal, like he was stepping into a different universe. The interview panel consisted of sharply dressed professionals, armed with experience and knowledge. As they asked their questions, Jake spoke confidently about his time on the force, the teamwork, the strategies, and the critical thinking he had honed under pressure. "You have quite an impressive background, Mr. Ramirez," one panelist noted, scribbling down notes. Jake felt his heart race. "I understand how to analyze threats quickly and make decisions in high-pressure situations." The panel exchanged glances, nodding. Jake could sense their interest growing, and courage surged within him. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was in control. As the interview concluded, adrenaline fueled him, but doubt still loomed. Was this really the right path? Weeks passed without a word, and the anxiety gnawed at him until he finally received a call back. "Mr. Ramirez, we'd like to offer you a position on our security team," the voice on the other end of the line announced, a jubilant ring overflowing with promise. Relief and exhilaration washed over him. He had done it. Handing in his badge had opened a door to a new chapter, one filled with potential. Transitioning to the corporate world wasn't without its challenges. The learning curve was steep, meetings were filled with jargon and data he wasn't accustomed to. Yet every time he encountered a struggle, he reminded himself of the strength he'd polished over the years. Mark, one of his new team members, approached him one day, curiosity dancing in his eyes. "Hey, Jake." "Bumpy, but I'm getting there," he replied, a genuine smile breaking through. Mark leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "We could use someone like you, you know." The warmth of camaraderie washed over Jake, reigniting some of the feelings he had missed so much. Genuine connections began to blossom within the walls of the corporate environment. The months rolled on, and Jake found himself more engaged each day. His instincts as a detective translated seamlessly when assessing threats, and he thrived in developing comprehensive security programs. He felt like a detective again, only this time he was on the preventive side. As he excelled at his job, he was offered the coveted corner office, an achievement he once thought impossible after leaving the force. Standing in that vast space, the view sprawling out towards the horizon, he marveled at how far he had come. Giving up his badge had once seemed like losing everything, but now it felt like transforming his entire life. He still carried memories of his past, but had learned to weave them into the fabric of who he was becoming. On a warm summer afternoon, Jake gathered his team for a brainstorming session. As they threw ideas around, laughter filled the room, a stark contrast to the heavy silence of the precinct. He felt alive, invigorated by their energy. "Jake, you lead us so well," Sarah, a junior team member, said, her eyes full of admiration. His heart swelled with pride. Purpose surged through him, bringing a sense of fulfillment he had long forgotten. Every day was a new opportunity to engage, collaborate, and protect in ways he could never have imagined. One evening, as the sun set, casting warm hues over the city, Jake stood in his office, reflecting on the journey that led him here. He thought about that day in the precinct when the weight of the badge had become unbearable, and now, in this corner office, he found himself at peace. His heart still bore the scars of the past, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they fueled his passion for creating safe environments, using every lesson learned to protect others from the darkness he had faced. Jake had risen from ashes, crafting a new life that offered not only security, but also hope. And as he looked out at the horizon, a swelling sense of gratitude washed over him. He had truly found his place in the world again. Handing in his badge hadn't been an end. It had been the beginning of a story far greater than he had ever dared to imagine. Detective Lee Carter stood in the shadow of the precinct, the heavy rain pouring down around him, washing away the remnants of another chaotic day. But today felt different. Today was the day he would make a choice that could change the trajectory of his life forever. He glanced down at his badge, cold and metallic, nestled in his palm. This badge, his protector and anchor, had become a burden, overstuffed with memories he couldn't bear to revisit. Just last night, he'd been at the scene of a double homicide, a grisly reminder of the darkness that seemed to seep into every corner of his world. He replayed the scene in his mind, the blood, the desperation, the sense of loss hanging in the air like a thick fog. The victims' families would never get those moments back, their lives forever twisted by a single horrific act. Looking into their grieving eyes had broken something deep inside him. Shaking off the memory, Lee took a deep breath. He had always been a protector, a guardian of justice. But lately, the weight of that responsibility had begun to crush him. The nightmares haunted him, reminding him of everything he couldn't change. It was time to confront the truth. He was exhausted. With a newfound determination, he headed inside the precinct. The familiar sounds of ringing phones, chatter, and the thud of paperwork filled the air. It felt like a whirlwind of chaos, but today he felt centered. This was the moment. Called out Officer Jensen. Lee forced a smile. As he walked past his colleagues, he could hear bits of their conversations, the camaraderie he once thrived on now feeling distant. He He strode into Captain Reynolds' office, noticing the captain was deeply immersed in a case file. The buzzing energy of the precinct faded away. "Detective Carter," Reynolds said without looking up. "Captain, we need to talk," Lee interrupted, his voice steady but urgent. Reynolds finally looked up, his expression shifting to concern. "I'm done," Lee declared. Reynolds blinked, clearly taken aback. "You can't be serious, you've been with us for years." Lee's heart raced, but he forced himself to meet the captain's gaze. "Last night was the breaking point. I'm burned out. I can't keep doing this." The room fell silent, filled with the weight of what Lee had said. Reynolds stared at him, eyebrows knitting together in disbelief. "Lee, everyone feels the weight, but it gets better. You're one of the best." "I've fought long enough," Lee replied, his voice firm. "I need to step away and find a new path." The captain let out a heavy sigh, clearly struggling with the idea of losing one of his top detectives. "Think about what you're throwing away." Lee shot back, feeling a surge of defiance. Reynolds opened his mouth to respond, but the words seemed to escape him. Instead, he watched as Lee removed his badge and act laden with emotion. He placed it firmly on the desk, and in that moment felt like he was shedding a part of himself. As he stepped out of the office, Lee felt both liberated and terrified. He was leaving behind a life he had constructed for himself, filled with adrenaline and purpose. The uncertainty ahead loomed larger than the precinct behind him. The rain continued to pour as he exited the building. The world felt different, vibrant, yet strangely distant. What was he going to do next? Without a badge, who was he? The questions spiraled in his mind, overwhelming him like waves crashing against a shore. Days turned into weeks as Lee tried to adjust to the silence of his new life. Instead of police radio chatter, he found himself playing video games and binge-watching TV shows late into the night. But the quiet was loud, and the past began to creep into his thoughts, shadows that reminded him of the weight he had once carried. One afternoon, while sitting in a coffee shop, he received a call from Laura, an old friend from college. "Hey Lee, just checking in." Her voice was warm, filled with genuine care. "I'm okay," he replied, unsure if he was lying to himself or to her. She pressed, sensing the hesitation in his voice. "Come on, we haven't seen each other in ages. Let's grab lunch," he said, meeting the distraction. They met at a quaint little cafe filled with the rich aroma of freshly baked bread. As Laura sat down, her eyes sparkled with energy. Lee chuckled softly, a bitter taste forming in his throat. "It's strange. You need to find something that excites you again," she urged. "What about all those leadership workshops we talked about in school?" "I don't know," he replied, running a hand through his hair. "Feels like such a leap." "Maybe it's time to consider it," she said, her confidence infectious. "You were meant to lead, Lee. You have this energy that draws people in." Her words resonated, igniting something inside him. That night he sat on his couch, scrolling through leadership and management courses. Each click opened doors to new possibilities that began to excite him. Maybe there was a life outside the badge, one filled with purpose that didn't come with the constant threat of danger. Weeks later, he enrolled in a workshop focused on corporate management and leadership. He attended with a mix of anticipation and anxiety, unsure of what to expect. Walking into the conference room was like stepping into a different universe, a stark contrast to the precinct that had consumed him for years. "Welcome, everyone," the instructor began. Lee felt the room pulse with energy, and for the first time in forever, he felt alive. They discussed management theories, teamwork, and effective communication. With each session, his perspective shifted, layers of his identity as a detective unwrapping to reveal a new self, a leader who could guide others away from confusion and towards clarity. As the weeks turned into months, Lee embraced this new journey. He found himself diving into projects, leading group discussions, and connecting with others in ways he had never done before. The skills from his days as a detective began to serve him in a new light. Communication, critical thinking, and quick decision-making blossomed in this unfamiliar territory. One evening, after a particularly engaging session, the instructor approached him. "Lee, you've really stood out in this course. Have you considered pursuing a managerial position?" The words hit him like a wave, crashing over his doubts. "I've thought about it," he admitted, swallowing hard. "Your past experience is a strength, not a drawback," she insisted. "You can bring a unique perspective to a managerial role." He nodded, feeling a surge of courage. The thought of stepping into a managerial role felt exhilarating yet daunting. Could he really do it? The next few months were a whirlwind of applications, interviews, and training sessions. He poured everything he had into this new venture, driven by the desire to ensure others never felt the weight of hopelessness like he had in the precinct. And then there it was, a job offer from a reputable corporation known for its innovative approach to leadership development. It felt surreal. Lee walked into his new office on the first day, butterflies dancing in his stomach. The walls were adorned with motivational quotes, the atmosphere buzzing with potential. As he took a seat at his desk and looked around, he felt a grin creeping onto his face. This was it. This was where he could make a difference. His new role involved organizing team-building exercises, mentorship programs, and workshops focusing on emotional intelligence. The challenges were different but invigorating. He poured his heart into each initiative, connecting with his team in ways he had never thought possible. "Lee, your approach has changed the way we think about leadership here," one of his colleagues said after a successful training session. The reality began to sink in. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. It was liberating to stand in front of a group, guiding them through exercises, empowering them to tap into their full potential. He felt a sense of pride growing within him, a feeling he had long missed after leaving the force. As he spent more time in his new role, Lee began to reflect on his journey. Handing in his badge had been a leap of faith, and the corners of his heart that once felt heavy now pulsed with purpose. In this new life, he was integral to creating safe spaces for others. It was a different kind of protection, one that mattered deeply. Months later, during a routine session, Lee noticed someone in the back, a young woman, visibly anxious. After the meeting, he approached her. "Is everything okay? I don't know if I belong here," she admitted, her voice shaky. He recognized that feeling. It was the same sense of doubt he had grappled with when he left the force. "You do belong here," he said gently. "Everyone starts somewhere, and it's okay to feel lost." Watching her eyes brighten at his encouragement filled him with satisfaction. And in that moment, he knew he had come full circle. No longer confined to shadows, he had turned his past into a beacon of hope. As he stood in his corner office, overlooking the bustling city below, Lee felt a rush of gratitude. He had exchanged one type of calling for another, transformed pain into purpose, and turned loss into opportunity. Each experience had shaped him, allowing him to inspire and uplift others. He remembered that rainy day when he had handed in his badge, feeling an overwhelming mix of fear and freedom. Little did he know it would lead him to a life filled with possibilities he had never considered. Lee Carter had found his place in the world, and he smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey. No longer just a protector of the streets, he had evolved into a leader who had the power to change lives, proving that sometimes letting go can lead to something far greater than you ever imagined. Detective Sam Roberts stood in front of the precinct, rain pouring down in sheets, drenching his uniform as if the heavens themselves were mourning the weight he felt in his heart. Today was different from any other day. Today was the day he would change everything. He clutched his badge tightly in his hand, the cool metal a stark reminder of the countless nights spent chasing down leads, the adrenaline of interrogations, and the faces of victims he couldn't forget. Just last night, he had been a part of a grueling standoff where emotions ran high and lives hung by a thread. He had watched as a father begged for his son's life, his pleas falling on deaf ears. The echoes of the gunshots rang in his mind, a cacophony of chaos he couldn't seem to shake. Sam had left the scene filled with dread, knowing he had done all he could, but still feeling powerless against the tide of violence that surged through the streets. Now, standing in the rain, he felt the burden he had carried for so long begin to suffocate him. The badge in his hand was no longer a symbol of honor, but a weight pressing down on his soul. He thought about all the times he had rushed into dangerous situations, the times he had laughed with colleagues, and the times he had comforted grieving families. It all blurred together, and a momentary wave of clarity washed over him. Maybe it was time to hand it in. Gathering his courage, he walked into the precinct, the familiar noise of chatter and ringing phones engulfing him. As he strode down the hall, he passed his colleagues, their faces glowing with energy, yet he felt like a ghost among them. They were diving headfirst into the ongoing chaos, while he felt like he was simply treading water. Called out Officer Collins, a grin plastered on his face. Sam forced a smile, but felt heavy in his gut. "You could say that," he replied, trying to keep his tone light even as his heart sank deeper. He entered Captain Hastings' office, the captain buried in paperwork, the faint glow of the desk lamp casting shadows on his face. "Detective Roberts," he greeted without looking up. Sam cleared his throat, preparing for what he was about to say. "Captain, I need to talk to you." Finally looking up, Hastings raised an eyebrow. "Captain, I've made a decision," Sam said, holding the badge tightly in his palm. The words hung in the air, thick as smoke. Hastings blinked, taken aback. "You can't be serious." "You've always been one of our best." Sam's heart raced as he fought to keep his voice steady. "I can't keep doing this, it's too much. I feel like I'm losing myself in this job. Last night Hastings leaned back in his chair, looking wearied, his gaze piercing through Sam. "We all have our tough calls, Sam, you know that." "It's not just one night," Sam replied, frustration boiling beneath the surface. "It's the weight of every call I've answered, every scream I've heard." The room fell silent. Captain Hastings seemed to wrestle with the idea, searching for the right words. "You know I care about you, right? I don't want to see you make a rash decision." Sam felt his heart quicken as he realized this could be his last chance. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool metal of the badge pinch into his skin. "I appreciate that, but this feels like the right choice for me." With resolve, he reached forward and placed the badge on the desk. It clinked softly against the wood, and for a moment it felt like a part of him was being left behind. As he stepped out of the office, the weight on his shoulders began to lift, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead rushed in like a flood. Outside, the rain had eased, leaving puddles reflecting the city's lights. As Sam walked away from the precinct, he felt scared but exhilarated. He was stepping into the unknown, a blank canvas where anything could happen. Days turned into weeks as he aimed to navigate this new reality. He tried to fill his time with hobbies he once enjoyed: painting, reading, even hiking. But the silence gradually pressed down on him, amplifying the loneliness he felt without the badge. One sunny afternoon, Sam received an unexpected call from an old friend, David, a sharp corporate executive in the marketing world. "Hey Sam, we should catch up. It's been too long," David suggested, his cheerful tone warm and inviting. "Sure," Sam replied, trying to mask the uncertainty swirling in his mind. They met at a bustling cafe downtown, the aroma of fresh coffee surrounding them. David's smile was infectious, and for a fleeting moment, Sam felt uplifted. David asked, leaning in with genuine curiosity. "It is," Sam said, hesitating before adding, "but honestly, I'm still trying to figure things out." David nodded, eyes sympathetic. "I get it, transitioning can be rough." For a moment, Sam contemplated sharing his feelings, but he found himself reluctant. Instead, he let the conversation shift to lighter topics. They reminisced about college days, the late nights filled with laughter and dreams of the future. But as they spoke, inspiration ignited in Sam's heart. He realized he had once wanted to challenge himself and venture into something different, something more stable. As the coffee cups cooled, David's words lingered in Sam's mind. "You know, the corporate world could use people with your skill set." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Management? Why not? You've led teams before. You know how to motivate people and handle pressure." Over the next few days, Sam began to explore this new avenue. He updated his resume, dusted off his old business attire, and started networking. It felt strange but exciting. He began to feel alive again, like he was taking control of his life. Weeks later, with the help of his friend, he landed an interview at a growing tech firm known for its innovative approach to leadership. The morning of the interview, butterflies danced in his stomach as he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. This wasn't just an interview, it was a leap into a brand new world. Walking into the office building, he felt the buzz of energy in the air. People moved through the halls with purpose, a stark contrast to the chaos of the precinct. The meeting room felt bright and open, filled with diverse faces, each ready to share their vision for the future. The interview was challenging yet invigorating. Sam spoke passionately about his background, sharing stories of his experiences, how he dealt with high-pressure situations, and the leadership he'd exercised on the force. The panel listened intently, nodding in recognition as he spoke. "Your ability to think on your feet is impressive," one interviewer noted. "Honestly, I believe my experience in law enforcement has equipped me to manage teams effectively. I understand how to motivate and lead in intense situations." "My goal would be to create a culture of collaboration and trust," Sam replied, confidence building within him. After the interview, he walked out, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Could he really transition from being a detective to managing a corporate team? As weeks passed, doubt crept back, but he was determined to push through. Finally, the call came. "Congratulations, Sam." Elation mixed with disbelief washed over him. A wave of relief followed by excitement flooded his heart. This was it, the starting line of a new journey. In the following months, as Sam settled into his new role, he discovered the challenges of the corporate world were different but equally demanding. He poured his energy into building teams, setting goals, and fostering a supportive environment. Familiar skills emerged from the back of his mind: conflict resolution, negotiation, empathy, but now he was reshaping them in a different context. His colleagues began to share their thoughts on how his leadership style made a difference. "You bring a level of understanding to the team that's rare," a junior member said during a feedback session. Sam felt a rush of pride hearing those words. He was pulling from deep within himself, using the lessons learned through years of service to inspire others. Slowly, he began to flourish in this new environment. One afternoon, he hosted a team-building workshop. As they participated in activities designed to foster collaboration and creativity, he watched as his colleagues started to open up. Laughter filled the room, breaking the barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. In that moment, Sam felt the thrill of connection. He wasn't just managing a team, he was connecting with them, shaping their journey together. Months turned into years, and Sam started to truly find his footing. He found joy in leading, and his corner office felt like a sanctuary where ideas blossomed and teams thrived. As he gazed out the window at the city skyline, he marveled at how far he'd come. Then one day, during a routine check-in, one of his team members, Mia, approached him with an anxious. "Of course," he replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I'm struggling with this project. I don't know if I'm cut out for this," she confessed, her voice wavering. Sam recognized that vulnerability. It had mirrored his own in the past. "Listen, everyone has moments of doubt," he said gently. "What matters is how we face them. You're capable, just take one step at a time." Watching her smile slowly emerge was a moment of pure joy. He saw the spark return to her eyes, and in that instant, he understood the impact he had. He wasn't just protecting lives anymore, he was nurturing potential and inspiring growth. As the seasons changed, Sam built a solid reputation, leading successful projects, mentoring others, and helping his team navigate challenges. The echoes of his past still lingered, but now they fueled his desire to create a positive impact in a world he had once viewed through a darker lens. Standing in his office one quiet evening, he reflected on his journey. Handing in his badge had felt like an ending, but it had opened doors to a new beginning, one filled with purpose, connection, and hope. The darkness that had once surrounded him had been transformed into a guiding light as he learned to channel his experiences into something beautiful. It wasn't just a career change, it was a powerful evolution of who he had become. The corner office was a testament to that transformation, a space where he could advocate for change and inspire others to realize their potential. Sam looked down at the city, alive and vibrant, and smiled. He knew he had forged a new path, one where he could continue to make a difference, and it all started with a single decision to hand in his badge. He had reclaimed his life, and in doing so, he had discovered a new calling, a place where he could thrive while lifting others along the way. Detective Tom Daniels stood in the precinct, rain drenching the streets outside, matching the turmoil that churned inside him. He watched as headlights flashed through the window, illuminating the dim room filled with the usual chaos of ringing phones and officers moving hurriedly. Today was different, and he felt it in his bones. Today, he was about to make a decision that could change everything. It had been a long week, filled with endless paperwork and sleepless nights. Just yesterday, he had been part of a sting operation that had gone horribly wrong. Innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire, and the screams, they haunted him. He still could hear the panic and see the faces of the families who would never be the same. It was more than he could bear. Each time he thought of them, guilt twisted in his gut. He had dedicated his life to serving and protecting, but what had it brought him? All he could see were the shadows of cases unresolved, lives lost, and pain that never faded. He looked down at his badge, its weight burdensome against his chest. Symbols of honor were now chains binding him to a life that felt too heavy to continue. He stepped away from his desk, heart racing, as he made his way to Captain Ross's office. The captain was a seasoned veteran of the force, respected by his peers, but a man who had seen too much. Tom knocked lightly on the door, wiping his sweaty palms on his trousers. "Come in, Daniels," Captain Ross replied, glancing up from his paperwork. Tom took a deep breath. "I need to speak with you about something serious," he said, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his chest. Ross leaned back in his chair, fixing him with an inquisitive gaze. Tom clasped his hands, feeling the cold metal of his badge biting into his palm. "I'm handing in my badge, Captain." A silence fell over the room, thick with disbelief. Tom could see the gears turning in Ross's mind as the captain's eyes widened. "You can't be serious," he said finally. "You've always been one of our best." Tom squared his shoulders and met Ross's gaze. "Last night was the last straw. I can't do this anymore." "Every cop hits a wall at some point, Tom," Ross countered, concern etching his features. "But digging deep is what separates the good from the great. You can't throw it all away over one incident." With a heavy heart, Tom took a step forward. "I've been needed for too long, Captain. I need to find a way to breathe again, to live without this weight on my shoulders." Ross's expression softened. "I understand, but I believe you've made a hasty decision." "Maybe I've spent too long counting on others," Tom replied, his voice thick with emotion. Ross sighed, nodding slowly. Tom pulled out the badge, feeling the cold metal against his skin one last time. As he placed it on the desk, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. It was as if he were shedding a heavy coat that had chafed against his skin for far too long. As he turned to leave, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking away from all that he had known. The precinct, once filled with laughter and camaraderie, now felt alien. Outside, the rain had lessened, but the world felt distant. He had made the choice to leave, but what lay ahead? Days turned into weeks without the rhythm of the precinct. The silence in his apartment felt deafening, and the empty hours stretched on endlessly. Tom buried himself in books, trying to rediscover old hobbies, yet nothing seemed to fill the void left by the badge he had worn for so long. The more he tried to escape the memories, the louder they screamed. One evening, as he wandered through the city streets, contemplating his next move, he stumbled upon a small community center bustling with activity. Children played, laughter soared, and a sense of joy enveloped him. He lingered on the sidelines, watching as a group of volunteers facilitated a workshop for kids. A voice broke through his reverie. "Hey there, you look lost." A woman approached, her smile warm and inviting. Just passing through," Tom said, awkwardly shifting his weight. "Passing through is good, but being involved is better," she replied, her enthusiasm contagious. "We could always use extra hands. We're working on a project to teach self-defense and empowerment to these kids." Tom hesitated, the memories of protecting others surfacing before him, but he quickly pushed them aside. "Qualification comes from experience," she said, "and I can tell you have plenty." Something about her approach sparked a flicker of interest within him. Before he could overthink it, he nodded. That first session felt foreign to Tom. He moved with uncertainty as he guided the kids through basic self-defense moves, but their energy revitalized him. They laughed, tripped, and fell, but they got back up, all the while joy painting smiles on their faces. It felt good, better than good. It felt like purpose. In the weeks that followed, Tom became a regular at the center. He not only taught self-defense but also began mentoring the kids, sharing stories of courage and determination. The healing began not just for the kids, but for him as well. He could see their faces light up when they learned something new, and it was as if the burden lifted from his heart inch by inch. One day, while leading a workshop, Sam, a scrappy 12-year-old with a knack for fighting, spoke up. "Why did you quit being a cop, Mr. Daniels?" The question stung. Tom stared at the floor for a moment, collecting his thoughts. "I wanted to save people, yeah, but sometimes saving others comes in different forms." The kids listened, their eyes wide with curiosity. Genuine, and it felt raw, he continued. "Sometimes we carry too much, but the most important part is finding a way to let go and rebuild." Tom watched as understanding washed over their faces, and in that moment he felt a deep connection with each of them. He was guiding them, yes, but they were guiding him too, pulling him from the shadows of despair. News of the workshops began to spread through the community, and soon the center was bustling with even more kids eager to learn self-defense. Tom felt invigorated. Each laughter, each shout of triumph when a new move was executed correctly flooded him with purpose. One afternoon, while finishing a lesson, the center's director approached him. "Tom, I've been watching you with the kids, and it's incredible." Tom echoed, surprised at the idea. "Exactly," she replied, her eyes gleaming with conviction. "You've navigated high-pressure environments. You know how to inspire others. I think you'd be great." He hesitated, uncertainty creeping in. But then a thought bubbled in his mind. This was a chance to forge a new path, to help empower those who had been overlooked. That fire inside him flickered back to life. "I'd love to help," Tom finally agreed, feeling a sense of hope blooming deep within him. Weeks turned into months, and the leadership program took shape, with Tom cementing his role as a mentor and leader. He taught the young adults valuable life skills, from communication to conflict resolution, and soon we began to see the effects as they transformed into confident individuals ready to face the world. Tom found himself thriving, but the past still lingered, a reminder of why he had left the badge behind, yet he did not shy away from it. Whenever the memories crept in, he would share them with the kids, showing them that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. One sunny afternoon, standing in front of a packed room, he caught a glimpse of the thriving young adults' confident smiles, laughter, and hope radiating off them. He felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He had found his corner office, not in the traditional sense, but in the hearts of those he was now helping. Just as everything began to fall into place, an unexpected opportunity arrived. A local business approached Tom about working together to create community workshops that would teach self-defense and leadership skills to adults as well. They saw the potential in the work he was already doing and wanted him to lead the initiative. Tom considered it. This could be the bridge between his past and his future, the chance to impact even more lives, but would he be ready? Could he confront the weight of expectations again? With support from his growing community of mentors and the kids who had inspired him to rise, he decided to embrace this opportunity. He saw it as a chance to reach into the heart of the community, where people were hungry for change and eager to lead through their own experiences. The workshops launched with great success, and soon, dozens of adults were signing up. Tom found himself back in a leadership role, but this time it wasn't about sirens or crime scenes. It was about empowerment, teaching individuals to take control of their lives and create their own paths. As he navigated this new venture, Tom felt the weight of his past grow lighter. Each moment spent guiding someone equated to healing a piece of his own wounds. He was reclaiming his narrative, reshaping his story into one of resilience and purpose. Weeks turned into months, and one day he received a phone call from an old colleague detective, Sarah Mitchell. "Hey Tom, I heard about the great work you're doing." "Thanks, Sarah," he replied, warmth spreading through him. "I'm not surprised," she said, sounding genuinely pleased. "You always had leadership potential." "Yeah," he laughed softly, "that's precisely it. Listen, how do you feel about coming back and sharing your experiences with the department? You could help train new recruits and discuss mental health in policing." Tom felt a rush of excitement and fear. It was an intriguing offer, one that felt like a bridge back to his roots, but with a twist. He could help pave the way for younger officers, show them that it was okay to be vulnerable and that there was life beyond the badge. After much consideration, he accepted the invitation. He prepared to speak, pouring his heart and soul into his presentation, knowing it could change lives. On the day of the training, he stood in front of a room full of new recruits, his heart pounding with anticipation. As he spoke about his journey, the struggles he faced at the precinct, and his path toward healing, he noticed the officers hanging onto his words. They were eager to learn, open to understanding that what they would face in their careers was normal. "That badge may define you," he said, his voice full of conviction, "but it doesn't have to define your value or worth. Remember, it's okay to speak up, to seek help when you need it." After the session, recruits approached him, thanking him for the vulnerability he had shared. It sparked something inside them, a recognition that they were not alone in their struggles. Tom felt a rush of fulfillment. He had come full circle. Weeks passed, and the support from both the community center and the precinct grew. The workshops thrived, and soon Tom was officially offered a position to develop a community outreach program aimed at fostering relationships between the police and the neighborhoods they served. As he took on this new role, the pieces of his life fell into place. No longer did he feel the weight of the badge crushing him. Instead, he had transformed it into a shield to protect others and help them heal. Looking out from his office, which was now a corner room in the community center, he smiled. This was his new beginning, a vibrant life lived through mentorship and connection. He learned that sharing his journey wasn't just a way to reflect on his past, it was a pathway for others to rise above their challenges. Tom Daniels had handed in his badge, but he had gained so much more in return. In the corner office of his heart, he stood proud, not just as a former detective, but as a leader inspiring hope and change. He had forged a new legacy, one that would shape the community and lift others along the way. What began with loss had blossomed into a future bursting with promise, and in that he found true fulfillment. Detective Mike Harris stood at the edge of the crime scene, rain pouring down and mixing with the blood-soaked pavement beneath his feet. The world he had always known, one built on justice and protection, suddenly felt like quicksand. Today was different. Today felt heavier. Today he was about to make a decision that would change everything. Just hours ago, they had responded to a call about a shooting in a rough neighborhood. The sight of a lifeless young man crumpled on the floor echoed in his mind. It wasn't just another victim. It was another child lost to violence, a child who had never really had a chance. Mike felt a familiar knot form in his stomach, a knot filled with anger and sorrow. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was fighting a losing battle. Around him, officers were collecting evidence and chatting in hushed tones, but he felt supernaturally detached. The chaos of their world surrounded him, but his mind drifted elsewhere, back to his home life and the heartfelt conversations he had had with his wife, Sarah. "I can't keep doing this to you," she'd said the last time he had come home shaken. But how could he? He had dedicated his life to this job, fighting for the very lives lost before him. He stared down at the badge clipped to his belt. The badge that had once filled him with pride now felt like a weight dragging him into the depths. With each passing moment, the memories of trauma and loss piled up in his mind like an avalanche, threatening to consume him whole. He couldn't breathe. He realized as he looked out into the rain that it was time to face the truth. If he didn't make a change now, he could lose himself completely. He took a deep breath and walked toward his sergeant, David Reed, who was poring over his notes, oblivious to the storm swirling inside Mike. "Sarge," Mike called out, his voice barely above a whisper. Sergeant Reed looked up, concern etched across his face. "What's wrong, Mike?" To talk, Mike stammered, feeling the conviction of his words chase away the fog. The sergeant nodded, and they moved away from the noise of the scene. Mike hesitated. The words fell from his lips like lead weights, heavy and final. Reed's expression shifted from concern to shocked. "You can't be serious. You're one of the best we have. Every time I respond to a call, I feel like I'm just putting a bandage on an open wound," Mike said, his voice trembling. "Last night was just the tipping point. Another life gone too soon, and I don't know how to fix it anymore." "Look, I get it," Reed said, looking visibly distressed. "We all go through rough patches. You can take some time off." Mike shook his head. "I've already taken too much time off. I need to find another path." "Mike, please think about this," Reed pleaded, concern mirrored in his eyes. "You're walking away from a life, from brotherhood." For a moment, doubt crept in. He thought of all the late nights spent with his fellow officers, all the camaraderie forged in the trenches, but the faces of victims swirled in his mind, drowning out the good memories. "I need to go," he finally stated, looking Reed squarely in the eyes. With that, Mike turned on his heel, feeling a strange sense of relief rush over him, mixed with a weight of fear. He headed toward the precinct door. He stepped outside. The rain began to lessen, but the fear within him turned into a slow-burning determination. Days turned into weeks as Mike tried to find his footing outside of police work. He spent his time attending workshops and trying to rediscover passions he had long buried beneath the badge, yet nothing seemed to quell the storm swirling inside him. One afternoon, as he sat in a coffee shop filled with laughter, he overheard a group of young professionals discussing leadership and teamwork. Their enthusiasm made him smile, but it also stirred something he had thought he'd lost. He remembered how the camaraderie of the force fueled him, how he used to inspire his colleagues to push through the stress of the job. A thought began to form in his mind: what if he could harness that energy elsewhere? The very next day, he enrolled in a leadership course designed for those transitioning from careers in high-stress environments. The first class was intimidating. Around him were people from various backgrounds, corporate professionals, ex-military, and even teachers, all looking to learn how to lead effectively. As the instructor began speaking about the fundamentals of leadership, something inside Mike ignited. He realized that many of the skills he had cultivated as a detective, strategic thinking, resilience, empathy, were transferable and crucial in any leadership context. Snippets of inspiration surged through him, fueling a rediscovery of purpose. "You need to engage your team," the instructor emphasized. "Leadership isn't about giving orders, it's about supporting those around you." Mike hung onto each word as if they were lifelines. He started to envision a way forward, not only for himself but for others who might be struggling in their roles. This new perspective felt liberating. Weeks went by, and as he immersed himself in the course, his confidence grew. He connected with classmates, sharing stories of challenges and triumphs. Conversations that once felt foreign began to feel like second nature. One evening after class, standing outside the building with a broad grin, Mike was approached by a fellow classmate, Maria. "You're really passionate about this," she noted, her eyes sparkling. "You should consider taking this further." Mike echoed, surprised at the idea. "Your experience is invaluable. You've lived through high-pressure situations. You know how to inspire people to rise above challenges," she encouraged. That night, as he sat in the quiet of his apartment, the idea refused to leave his mind. The more he thought about coaching, the more he felt the pieces fall into place. If he could help others find their way, it would allow him to heal as well. Days later, Mike took a leap and began researching certifications in coaching and mentoring. He signed up for a course, diving deep into the tools and techniques that would enable him to guide others. In his heart, a flickering ember began to blaze brightly. As he completed the coaching certification, he felt a renewed sense of purpose flowing through him. He could transform the lessons learned on the force into a force for good. Months later, he launched his own coaching practice, specializing in leadership development for high-pressure professions. His first client was a district attorney's office, filled with young attorneys eager to learn how to navigate the whirlwind of legal battles while maintaining their mental health. Mike met them in a conference room, bright lights reflecting off the polished table. As they gathered around, their faces showed a mix of excitement and apprehension. He felt a wave of nerves wash over him, but he steadied his breath. "Thank you for inviting me to work with you," he began, his voice steady. "I want to share my experiences to help you navigate through pressures while keeping your mental well-being intact." The energy shifted as he began to share his story. He spoke of the darkness he had faced and how isolated he had felt at times. The room grew silent, the young lawyers hung on his every word. He guided them through exercises designed to foster collaboration, self-reflection, and resilience. As the session progressed, Mike could see their doubt fading, replaced by determination and camaraderie. They began to connect, laughing and sharing experiences openly. It felt like magic, and for the first time in a long while, he felt truly alive. Weeks turned into months of intensive training and workshop sessions. Mike established himself as a mentor with a growing reputation among young professionals. He watched as clients bloomed, thriving in their roles, forming connections that nurtured their growth. It was everything he had hoped for and more. Yet as he stood in front of a packed room one day, something shifted inside him. He shared a lesson about vulnerability and connection, the foundation of true leadership. And in that moment, an epiphany struck him. He had come full circle. He had taken the pain of his past and transformed it into a guiding light for others. Then late one evening, he received an unexpected call from Captain Reed. "Mike, we need you back. There's been an incident in the precinct. We're stretched thin, and I'm worried about the state of morale." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. The precinct was a world he had left behind, but it was still his home. The urge to help his former colleagues stirred something deep in his gut. Mike started, conflicted. "Listen, we're not asking you to go back to the streets. We need someone in a leadership capacity, someone who understands what they're going through. You could lead initiatives focusing on mental health and resilience." The thought rattled his mind. Could he return to that world and make a positive impact, transpose what he had learned in the coaching world back into the precinct? It was a difficult question filled with trepidation and hope. "Give me some time to think about it," Mike finally said, his heart racing. As he hung up, he felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The path forward was shrouded in uncertainty. What if it was the chance to change lives, to foster the kind of environment he had longed for in law enforcement? Or what if it was diving back into the chaos that had driven him away in the first place? He stood up and looked out the window, rain cascading down the glass, mirroring the tumult inside his heart. He realized that this could be the moment that defines him, the moment where he truly took the lessons of his past and spun them into a new kind of reality. Taking a deep breath, Mike felt the surge of courage rising within him. The call to protect had always been there, but now he could do it differently. He could be the change that echoed through the precinct, the leader he had always wanted to be. But the real question loomed large in front of him. Could he integrate his old life with his new, and could he truly live a life without the weight of the badge holding him down? With that, he opened his phone and began to type a response to the captain, preparing to step back into a world filled with possibility, but also fraught with the haunting shadows of his past, a crossroads that could redefine not only his future, but also the futures of countless others.